How do I look? Got it. All right. Good to be with you all, and it's great to be here with you once again. I want to open our time together with a meditation together. In this particular meditation, I like to open with a reading. It's a biblical reading. It's actually the story of the Good Samaritan, which will come in place later. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and he bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." So let us now be in meditation, contemplation, and silent prayer together. And I invite you now out of the silence to, as you wish, call forth names of people or places or things that you wish to hold up in memory and care. Let us call forth those names.
Joe Warren, Elsa Sloan, Mary Emma Hannah, Kim, Sophie and Ed Stokes, Bill Kirkham, Paul Mueller.
For all these things and more, we strive for a day when the earth shall be made fair and all her people one. So I've got a special treat for us all today, which is I'm going to give you a chance together where we're going to talk about somebody who I really love. And he's one of my favorites. And he really offers us the spirit of beauty and goodness and joy and truth. And he likes to sing. And one of his favorite songs is this one. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbor. I can't figure out yet how to do the shoes and do that at the same time. The man has talent. If it isn't obvious, Mr. Rogers is one of my great heroes. He's somebody that I really love and respect. And I look for heroes, people who show me what human beings are capable of. That's something that for lack of better words, I collect. I collect people that have shown me the amazingness of humanity. It's grounding for my, if you will, faith in the liberal religious tradition with its core principles that God is love and that holiness is present in each and all of us. These are core liberal religious historical perspectives. And in an age where the best of humanity, it's sometimes not easily seen. It remains true that there are and have been so many extraordinary people who've shown us the goodness of which we are capable, and Mr. Rogers is one great example. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers. He was one of my childhood loves, and I know many of us in this room either raised children who love Mr. Rogers, or we watched him ourselves, or are watching with our kids right now, the latest Daniel Tiger series inspired by him. We remembered his shoes and his sweaters and his songs like Won't You Be My Neighbor and The Neighborhood of Make Believe and The Trolley and Picture, Picture and more. And his gentle and honestly, odd ways somehow captivated a generation of children, defying the fast-paced, explosive orientation of other children's television. Fred Rogers did something remarkable for us. He taught us that we were special and lovable and capable of loving. He taught us to wonder and to appreciate. He taught us it was okay to feel, safe to be angry or sad or afraid or happy. He taught us through his actions, through his stories, and through his songs. As a child, Mr. Rogers enchanted me and made me feel special, but as an adult, he became something quite different. He became a hero for me, and I find myself wondering about him a lot. He's somebody that I think about a lot for whatever reason. He's somebody that keeps coming into my mind, and I think about him. And because he was an unusual man. He would behave in childlike ways, but he also was a man of incredible discipline, something that we maybe didn't always see. He weighed 143 pounds his entire adult life, and 143 was his favorite number. And he loved that number 143 because it was his personal code for I love you. 143, one letter for I, four letters for love, three letters for you. And he kept his weight at that place his whole entire adult life. That's odd. And it's also extraordinarily dedicated and devoted to a particular choice in his life. Something that we don't always talk about Mr. Rogers is his religious background. He was a Presbyterian minister. And though it was not something often spoken about, the show to him was his ministry. It was his way of doing ministry. And the older I've gotten, the more fascinated I've become by that side of him, that religious side of him. In the Unitarian Universalist early tradition, we often spoke of and used this term, walking in the ways of Jesus. We understand that today to mean that being a religious person is less about beliefs and creeds and more about how we live our lives. That's what it means to be a religious person from a Unitarian Universalist perspective. How do we live our lives? And our historical grounding comes from the simple but very important distinction with many other Christian traditions in the United States. For us, it's most important to walk your walk rather than talk your talk. And this is a vital discernment between, I think we would say, good and I guess we could say bad religion. That we really appreciate what are the fruits of your actions as determining what kind of religious person you are. And Mr. Rogers embodied that, never speaking theologically in his professional life. But the more I look at it, revealing his deep Christian faith through the way he lived his life, that he was a very devoted person to his particular chosen faith of Christianity, and he was remarkably devoted to that through the ways he chose to live his life. And I wondered for quite a while about why Mr. Rogers cultivated what almost seemed like an inappropriately childlike persona as an adult. He was known for bringing out his puppets in private conversations. That's that's a weird thing to do. That's an unusual thing to do. And there's a scene in the Tom Hanks movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, that exemplifies this. I'm not sure how historically accurate that particular scene was, but it does speak to common behaviors that he displayed when with people. And in the scene, Mr. Rogers is talking with a reporter, Lloyd Vogel, who is interviewing him. And in the midst of the interview, as they're doing this interview, this guy interviews really high profile people all over the world. In the midst of this interview, this very seemingly serious interview, Mr. Rogers said, "Would you like to meet my special puppet friends from the neighborhood of make-believe?" And he unzips this little suitcase and brings out Daniel Tiger and King Friday the 13th. And the reporter says, "They look like they've seen better days." You ever think about swapping them out and getting new ones? Almost looking offended, Mr. Rogers responds, "Didn't you have a special friend when you were very young?" Lloyd, a special friend, a special toy or a stuffed animal that you loved very much, even as it got ratty and worn and made you just love it all the more. And they discuss Lloyd's toy, Old Rabbit, stuffed animal, a rabbit. And Mr. Rogers asks, "And who gave you Old Rabbit?" And he answers, "My mom." And Mr. Rogers zeroes in. "She must love you very much. I'm sure if she saw you today, the person you have become, she would be proud of you." His mom had passed away when he was young. And the reporter, obviously uncomfortable, tries to go back to questions. And Mr. Rogers pulls out Daniel Tiger and begins to start a three-way conversation with Daniel Tiger and the reporter. Mr. Rogers says sometimes Daniel is too shy to talk, but that's okay. And Daniel Tiger says, "I'd like to meet Old Rabbit." The reporter blurts out, I don't want to talk about Old Rabbit." And Mr. Rogers says to Daniel, "Maybe Lloyd doesn't feel like talking today, Daniel, and that's okay." Now that whole thing, that's a really unusual thing to do. That's weird. Adults don't do that kind of thing. We're supposed to set aside childish ways, aren't we? And yet Mr. Rogers actively and passionately held on to his childhood and some of his childlike ways. And as I thought about this choice of his and knowing that Mr. Rogers had this quiet but devout Christian faith, I remembered a quote from Jesus. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And while I've never heard it said or even known if it was ever asked, I really wonder whether Mr. Rogers took that quote so seriously that he built his life around it. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Amazing. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Another example of how Mr. Rogers showed this quiet devotion to his particular faith, he said, there was this scenario. Well, many of us know this, of course, but in the late 1960s and before, it was still common for pools to be racially segregated. It had become illegal to do so, but there still was a lot of difficulty around that. And there's a famous scene in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood where Officer Clemens, who's a Black police officer, comes to visit Mr. Rogers at his home. And it's a hot day, they're outside, and Mr. Rogers is soaking his feet in a small pool. And he invites Mr. Rogers to join him in the pool, and he does so. At the end, Mr. Rogers shares his towel with Mr. Clemens, who then dries his feet. He's also got a little hose and he's spraying his feet and spraying Mr. Clemens' feet, giving the hose to Mr. Clemens to spray his feet. And truthfully, honestly, as a child, I don't think I remembered that scene. There were so many scenes of Mr. Rogers that wasn't one that necessarily stood out to me because honestly, I think it didn't come across as anything but normal. But as an adult, I am absolutely in awe of this choice, how radical a decision it was to do this in the late 60s to use a show to teach a different way. And I am reminded of, again, some additional famous words from Jesus, an act he committed as part of his Last Supper, where he washed the feet of his disciples. Foot washing was a big deal at that time, and people walked everywhere in open shoes, and feet were very dirty. It was not something a revered person should come in contact. There was a heavy kind of purity-based religious code at that time of what was clean and what was unclean. And to be religious was to be clean, and to be against religion was not to be clean. So for Jesus to embrace foot washing was to crash into that standard of purity and impurity, which he did so many times in his ministry. And after doing so, Jesus said, after he washed the feet of his disciples, he said, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." The foot washing practice continues today, often as a part of Maundy, Thursday services in recognition of Jesus's Last Supper. And again, the resemblance of what Mr. Rogers did in his life and in that story with Officer Clemens and in relation to how his faith taught him how to live seems remarkably linked. It just seems like he's found a way to bring his particular faith in through the demonstration of behavior and how to act and how to be with people. And lastly, I recognize Mr. Rogers' faith in his entire concept of neighbors and neighborhood. Through the show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we are taught who our neighbors are. Biblically, perhaps the most central vision of Jesus's ministry comes when a man versed in religious law comes to test him, and he asks Jesus what he must do to obtain eternal life. And together they come to the conclusion that the most important thing to do is to love your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbors as yourself. This, you know, two-pronged commandment actually is so important within the Christian tradition that it has a name. It's called the Great Commandment, and is known as Jesus's summary of the law. It's perhaps the most famous quote attributed to Jesus. So we can see Mr. Rogers' dedication to the neighbor as a direct reflection of Jesus's call to love our neighbor. But what's interesting about the Great Commandment is the story that immediately comes after it. So there's a story, and we did that in the reading before. There's a story that comes immediately after Jesus talks about this great commandment of love your God and love your neighbor. After Jesus tells people to love their neighbor, after that comes up in the story, someone asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" They don't ask, "How do I love my neighbor?" They say, "Who is my neighbor?" And then Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. In the story, as we heard, a man is robbed and left to die on the side of the road, and a priest walks by but doesn't help him. And then what's known as a Levite comes by, and that's an assistant to the priest, basically comes by and also walks by and does nothing to help. But a Samaritan comes along and helps this man, taking him up, bringing him to an inn and paying for his medical care and his stay. But to understand this story and to really get the power of it, we have to understand who a Samaritan was for the people Jesus was speaking to. For you and I, the Samaritan, probably the only sense of that word to us is this story. But for the people at the time, a Samaritan had very specific meanings, stereotypes, connotations. And so, for lack of better words, Samaritans at that time were considered traders, or to use the horrible term, they were considered half-breeds. They were former Jews who had been conquered and assimilated into a conquering culture, and they were despised for giving up their faith to this larger oppressive culture. So when the Good Samaritan story is finished, Jesus, he asks this strange question. He does not ask, as we might think, who in the story loved his neighbor. He doesn't ask that. So the Good Samaritan is not a story about how do you love your neighbor. He addresses the question that was asked. He said, "Who was the neighbor to the robbed man?" Who was the neighbor to the robbed man? And again, not who loved his neighbor, but who was his neighbor? And someone responded, "The man who helped him." And the entire audience listening to Jesus now understands that to love your neighbor, you must love the Samaritan. And that's remarkable. That's a remarkable kind of flip. And when I think about Mr. Rogers and his desire to truly love his neighbor, all his neighbors, I think he crafted a life that lived into truly knowing who our neighbor is and loving that neighbor. All of that, all of this, everything here is speculation. I don't think I've ever seen anything that talked about and specifically asked Mr. Rogers about the connection between all of these things. But knowing he was a devoted Christian, I've never, and not seeing these things, I still find it fascinating. I find him fascinating. I find his dedication to his beliefs as an inspiration. And, sometimes we are asked if we could invite anyone to dinner. Who would we invite? Mr. Rogers would be on that list for me, because I'd want to talk about this side of him. I want to kind of really say, hey, is this connection real? When you were doing this, were you thinking that? I'd be very curious to say about that, because I think there's a depth to this man that goes beyond that kind of image on the TV. And that, as we move forward in our time today, and I realize that to live the life I want to live, I look to inspirations like this man, people who have, with so much heart and fire and dedication, lived into their values, just really deeply said, this is who I want to be, and I'm going to do it with fullness and strength. I look to people like that, and perhaps more importantly, lived into the greatest values of the greatest teachers of our times. People who carried forth the greatest ethics and virtues of our species, who I look for people who lived into love. And in these times when goodness is needed, perhaps as much as ever, I invite you to let Mr. Rogers inspire you. May he carry you forward. May he encourage you and drive you to love into your greatest values. We need more people like Mr. Rogers, whatever faith tradition they come from. But even more importantly, we need more people like me and you who do our best to walk in the ways of the greatest values of our age and show the world a better way. Shalom, Amen, and blessed be. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
Thank you very much. And will you be downstairs afterwards? Okay, and then if anybody wants to talk or conversation and coffee, they'll be down there. I just want to do the closing words and then we'll sing ourselves out. Lovable and loved. Here may you know that you are lovable and that indeed you are loved. And may you carry that love out into the world as a blessing.